back in the 90s, I was like, if you ever saw the movie Wolf of Wall Street, New York City, cold calling stockbroker, essentially working in like a frat house. It was quite an experience. What's being direct deposited into your bank account after all those fees, the E&O, the registrations, the who knows what fee. Spoiler alert, your payout is not 90%. It's going to be far less than that. Not to mention the restrictions on your abilities to do work. Again, doesn't make it wrong. Just be informed. What really is your true net payout, and use that as part of your calculus into what you want to do. Now you fast forward to today, I would say at least 1 out of 3 prospective clients that I talk to, 1 out of 3 are asking me, are you a fiduciary? I don't think there's any other industry out there at all that has such a combination of, again, low barriers to entry and upside potential. What do you need to start an RIA? Well, as I like to say, a laptop and a dream is about it. But make sure that you really want to have your own business, because there's a lot to it. I would say, and everyone wants sort of that line of demarcation, I would say 500 million. At 500 million, at least, probably closer to $1 billion, do the economics make sense to have your own shop? That's probably the easiest comparison, because whatever your costs are on the IBD side is going to be exactly the same as the RIA side, except for just one line item if you're putting together your pro forma, and that's compliance. I ended up starting a branch of Raymond James, right, on the IBD side, did that for 20 years. Came to realize I'm doing RIA business inside a broker-dealer, right? I was like 98% fee-based. And then you start questioning, why am I doing it this way? Not only so much subjecting myself to a lower payout, which is generally the case, but also subjecting myself to so many constraints, what I wanted to do with marketing and video marketing and social media marketing and content marketing. So that's when I decided to break away.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to hop on the podcast today. For anyone that is considering opening up their own RIA, tucking into an existing one, or just has basic curiosity about the RIA space in general, this is definitely the podcast for you. Today, we have on Chuck Fioa. He's both the CEO and the founder of Sovereign Financial Group, a great breakaway solution in the RIA space for advisors. Also the founder of GoRIA, powered by InvestmentNews, which is a great resource center for advisors that are considering looking at the RIA channel. Chuck, I really appreciate you hopping on today.
No, you bet, Corey. I was looking forward to it. So thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. So Chuck, I know you kind of took a route from the independent broker dealer space to the RIA route. Do you want to talk a little bit about, your journey in terms of how you got where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. It actually even started a little further back. Back in the 90s, I was like, if you ever saw the movie Wolf of Wall Street,
Yeah.
it wasn't very dissimilar to the situation I was starting off in. New York City, cold calling stockbroker, did that from like 1995 to 1999. So 4 years of essentially working in like a frat house. It was quite an experience. If you saw the movie, if anything, underestimated or under portrayed some of the shenanigans. It was quite the experience, but it was a good learning experience. Built up some money, and then when I had enough, or at least what I thought was enough in the bank, I ended up starting a branch of Raymond James, right, on the IBD side. Did that for 20 years. Came to realize I'm doing RIA business inside a broker-dealer, right? I was like 98% fee-based. And then you start questioning, why am I doing it this way? Not only so much subjecting myself to a lower payout, which is generally the case, but also subjecting myself to so many constraints, what I wanted to do with marketing and video marketing and social media marketing and content marketing. So that's when I decided to break away. I broke away in 2019, but was really giving it thought for a good 2 years before that. So 2017 is when the light switch kind of flicked. Spent a couple of years doing the due diligence, and then in 2019 broke away, formed Sovereign, with the idea of creating essentially a tuck-in solution, but a very niche one. So we are really built to do business the way I like to do business, right? So if you like the way I do business, you would like Sovereign. If you don't like the way I do business, you would not. And what I mean by this is it's built for cash flow-based financial planners. So literally financial planning advisors that use e-money or Right Capital or Rhine Planning, all three of which are cash flow-based. And that's what we've built. And we continue to have some really good success in bringing quality people in. And it's for that reason. We know who we are, we know who we serve, and we serve the cash flow-based financial advisor. And that niche strategy has really worked well for us.
That's awesome. I love it. And we'll definitely dig into that a little bit more, at the end of the podcast. But, Chuck, we've talked about your offering quite a few times. I'm definitely a fan. Um, a big part of what you're doing and how we came together is kind of on the Go RIA stuff. I mean, I constantly see you online. You're at all the industry events. You're talking to, the top minds in the RIA industry. You've built a great resource for financial advisors that are considering this. I mean, what have you been up to lately? What's getting you really excited about the future of the RIA channel?
Honestly, it's just the flexibility to do things that you just can't do in a broker dealer environment, right? And we kind of touched upon that with the marketing. And this is not, to bash broker dealers, right? I lived in the broker dealer space for 20 years. I love Raymond James. I think their IBD offering is fantastic.
Yeah.
But if you want more, right? And I'll give you a great example, and this is top of mind because this literally just happened um, this past Friday, just a couple of days ago. So we are actually launching, or now I could say past tense, we have launched our own 40 Act tender offer fund, right? And one of the recurring segments I do on GoRIA.com, we call it try this at your broker dealer, right? So imagine you go to your complex manager at fill in the blank wirehouse and say, I want to start a mutual fund.
Yeah.
you're already smiling. There's just no way that's going to happen,
Yeah.
right? So now that's an extreme. I think very few advisors are going to break away and start a 40 Act fund. And let me tell you something, it's a huge, huge lift. I love it. Like I love the business side of the business. So it was great for me. But even without the whole idea of launching your own fund, which is something you just could not do in a broker dealer environment, the flexibility of marketing the way you want, doing things like GoRIA.com. I think it could be done if you were in the broker dealer world, but we all know that the compliance turnaround times, it would just be impossible, right? So what we've done is we've set up a compliance mechanism in our shop, which is very business friendly, meaning things get turned around quickly. I'm able to do stuff like the GoRIA.com, which is a ton of content. And if I had to wait even 12 or 24 hours each time to post something, it would not be the same uh, resource that it is today. So that freedom to do what you want as you want to do it, that is just the paramount of going RIA for me.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, so the thing that's really exciting me, I mean, in the broker dealer space, we see all of this consolidation, most recently LPL and Commonwealth. That's been happening for pretty much close to a decade now. But on the RIA side, me and my team, there's 15 of us across the United States. We're doing this 40 plus hours a week. And every single week, we're on a phone call and we're learning about some sort of new, truly unique RIA solution, whether that's helping
Mhm.
people launch their own RIA, whether it's a great solution like yours to be able to plug into. There's just so many different firms, and truly on a bi-weekly basis, I'm already learning about an extremely successful, multi-billion dollar RIA that I've never even heard of before, which is
Right.
just so great for the choice of financial advisors, but also really overwhelming at the same time. But
Mhm.
it's always good to have more choice.
Without a doubt. And I think we even talked about this some other time before, Corey, and that is the way I like to put it is if you're looking to join like a wirehouse environment, and there are clearly people that are still joining wirehouses, you probably have what, a handful of good choices.
Yeah.
If you're looking to join an IBD, well, you probably have one less now, right?
Yeah.
With Commonwealth going into LPL, but you still have a good 10, 11 good IBD choices. But if you want to join an RIA, you have literally hundreds of real good, viable choices.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the good news, bad news, right? The good news is you have a couple hundred to choose from. The bad news is you have a couple hundred to choose from. So how do you parse through all that? But I think it is the real hallmark of the RIA space is even if you don't want to go through the effort of building your own, and we could even talk about that too. I could only build my own because I really love building the business. I love that. That really turns me on. But there's some advisors that just want to hone on their financial planning work and leave everything else to someone else. And that's kind of where we and 199 other good choices come into play. Um, but to be able to do that the way you want to do it and choose one that you like, that's what makes the RIA space so special. It requires some navigation, of course, but if you're willing to do the due diligence, I would argue you could find a firm to plug into that's about 95% exact to what you would have built yourself. And that's the power of all this choice.
So, Chuck, we both have conversations with people all the time. Should you open up your own RIA? Should you plug into something existing? From the people that you have conversations with, like, do you see a certain personality type that's kind of perfect for opening up their own RIA, and maybe one that's, clearly just not a good fit for that?
Yeah, it really comes down to who are you as a person. And I don't want to get too terribly, new agey on this, but you got to
Yeah.
really understand who you are. Like, are you an entrepreneur?
Mm.
Now, for me, it was easy. I was really blessed with the gift of knowing at an early age what I wanted to do, right?
Yeah.
And I'm talking single digit, like 8 or 9 years old. All I wanted to do was have my own business, not to become a professional athlete, not to be a rock star, but to have my own business. Now that's fortuitous because I'm not particularly athletic, nor am I particularly, musically talented, but I wanted to have my own business.
Yeah.
So I've always wanted that. So all of my decisions throughout my life have been moving me toward opening up my own business. If you're like that, then you should, right? There's so many people that will say, well, you need 500 million, you need a billion. I disagree with that. If you really have a burning desire to have your own business, I think the RIA space is one of the best industries for that, meaning it has the lowest barriers to entry and the highest upside potential. I don't think there's any other industry out there at all that has such a combination of, again, low barriers to entry and upside potential. What do you need to start an RIA? Well, as I like to say, a laptop and a dream is about it. And there's so many resources out there to help you. But make sure that you really want to have your own business because there's a lot to it. I happen to love it, but if you're someone that doesn't love the business side of things, like developing systems and integrating, our Salesforce with our e-money, with our Orion, I like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But if you don't like that kind of stuff, find a firm that has already done that for you, see how much they charge, and if it makes sense, economically, I think it generally makes more sense. And I would say, and everyone wants sort of that line of demarcation, I would say 500 million. At 500 million, at least probably closer to a billion, do the economics make sense to have your own shop? But if you want to have your own shop and you're not optimizing for economics, but rather pride of ownership, which I completely get, and I love the idea of pride of ownership, you can have $10 million on a laptop and have at it because there's plenty of resources out there that will help you start that RIA if that's really what you want to do, but make sure that's what you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it takes some deep exploring into your strengths and weaknesses. And
Yeah.
I go through this with financial advisors a lot, but me personally, I just want to spend as much time as I possibly can doing things like this, providing value to financial advisors, working with my clients. Like my Microsoft Outlook breaking all the time, or my Zoom not working, or my printer not working, or like paying payroll. Like that's
Right.
enough on the entrepreneurial scale for me. Like in my
Yeah.
opinion, my best, my best time is spent doing the things that I was saying before, not necessarily doing compliance or technology integration, as I'm not super technologically savvy. But that doesn't mean that it's the right answer for anyone. I plugged in and partnered with Bridgemark Strategies because they moved a lot of the things out of the way for me that I think were going to
Mhm.
provide a lot of frustration and take a lot of time out of my day to do the things that I wanted to do. So that was a personal decision for me. And there's a lot of people out there that I think just want to spend time with clients and doing things that they enjoy doing. But the things that people enjoy doing can be completely different with another set of advisors. So I really just think, there's no right or wrong answer here, and it really just depends on the person.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's not right or wrong. It's simply informed or uninformed,
Yeah.
right? There's no right or wrong, but just make sure you're making an informed decision. And again, the good news is there's great resources out there, whether you want to build or tuck in.
Hey, breaking in real quick. I really hope you're enjoying this episode and finding my YouTube channel of value. If you're a high performing financial advisor that can use somebody as a guide or a resource to explore all your transition options out there in the marketplace. I'm a non-biased, independent transition consultant that can help make this process so much easier for you. And another plus, it costs absolutely nothing to work with me. If you want to have a conversation, please feel free to text, call, email, DM me. My contact information is all over this episode, and I'll let you get back to it. I mean, your name's on the ADV of your RIA. You have the RIA. I mean, you're running it yourself. You already mentioned one thing that you can do on the RIA side that you simply can't just do at a broker dealer in terms of opening up a 40 Act fund. I mean, what are some of the other things that would blow an advisor's mind if they were like just taking a look at the independent channel and not taking a look at the RIA side from the people you've spoken to and also just your personal experiences?
Yeah. I could tell you right now, what comes to mind, we keep talking about marketing, but I think everyone really knows that, right? You could clearly market more easily in the RIA space.
Yeah.
But here's something that's I think underlooked, and I'll share this with you. It's the idea of compliance your way, and that's actually what we have branded our compliance system. And I don't want this to necessarily be a pitch for Sovereign, but I think this is a good example. So what we have done, because we are a platform, so we have advisors that do business this way, that way, the other way. So we wanted one platform for compliance because it's important for the firm to stay compliant. It's really important for the advisor to stay compliant. So we devised a system that we've branded as Compliance Your Way. We're actually trademarking it. And essentially, you have two ways of staying compliant. Either pick a number and a time horizon, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One is, capital preservation. 5 is speculative, everywhere in between, and a time horizon. Or, and this is the part that we're super proud of, and this is why I say we are built for that financial planning advisor that literally uses e-money or Right Capital or Orion. It's that specific. Rather than going the pick a number route and time horizon, which is a little bit more traditional, they can also just pick one drop down on our systems. Everything is all systematized, called TAMI, T-A-M-I. TAMI stands for Time Horizon Asset Management Integration. What that means is you're taking your 5-year cash flow report, and if you're an advisor that uses e-money or Right Capital or Orion Planning, you know the 5-year cash flow report. That's the cornerstone for everything you do if you use one of those systems. That 5-year cash flow report is going to show the time horizon, cash flow needs for that client, and then we integrate it with the asset management or in-house TAM. So essentially, you do that 5-year cash flow report, you press a couple of buttons, that goes to the trading desk, and you're not only done, but you're also compliant because all you're saying is the asset allocation is a match for these cash flow plans, which I is the one thing I'm actually the most proud of, and we're trademarking that too, Tammy. And what is that? It's really the bucket system, right? Which we certainly didn't create, but we fine-tuned. So imagine going again to your complex manager saying, rather than going through all this compliance rigmarole and this and that and the other thing and all this stuff, which in my opinion boils down to CYA, right? Cover your butt. Can't I just do a 5-year cash flow report and then have you guys trade to that cash flow report? The answer would be no. But if it's your RIA and you feel that's a very sufficient way to stay compliant, which I fully do, I think even more so than picking a number between 1 and 5, we have approved it. So that way, as long as that advisor is using one of those systems and is generating a 5-year cash flow report, that alone de facto makes you compliant, which I think is super cool. And how efficient is that? So creating systems like this, the way that you think makes sense. And for your audience that are in the broker-dealer world, and I was in the broker-dealer world for over 20 years, how many times do you find yourself saying, why are they doing it this way? It would be so much better that way. But of course, you can't make it that way because you're in their house. You got to play by their rules. But if you create your own house or join a house that has a set of rules that align with yours, you could do these types of things that you've always felt would make sense. Why is no one doing this? But now you can. And I think that is, without question, the most powerful thing about going RIA.
That's awesome. And many people have seen, the Michael Kitces technology,
Yep.
map that almost doubles in size every single year.
Mhm.
It's literally endless amount of, bolt-ons that you could add on to your race car to make it, go a
Right.
little bit faster as well, which is really impressive. The thing that's really blown my mind is just the overall investment selections that are out there as well. I was just talking to another owner of an RIA the other day that's been having the ability to offer his clients, shares in NFL stadiums. I mean,
Hmm.
that's something that a lot of people would be really excited about that isn't really available on the independent broker dealer or the wirehouse space yet. There's just so many small boutique investment managers out there that maybe don't want to or can't afford the millions of dollars it costs to get on an independent broker dealer shelf that they still have access to at some of the major custodians, which I see as a huge benefit.
Yeah. Again, it comes down to an incredible amount of choice of technology, investments, compliance methodologies. There's a lot. And again, that's the good and bad. The good is there's a lot of choice. The bad is you got to really parse through those and figure out what's going to be best for you. But Corey, you're spot on. The investment selections, the wirehouses, the broker dealers just cannot compare because as an independent, we could custody with multiple different places. We can plug in whatever investment solution we want, whatever tax or option overlay solutions, of which there's a lot of really cool ones of those too. We could just get whatever we want into our shop because it's for us to make that decision, not, a department that's 5 levels above. By the time it goes up and then comes back down, it's almost inevitably a no. Uh, the RIA world is much more of the how could we make this work as opposed to just going with the simple, no, we're not going to do it. That's a great thing.
Yeah, I love what you were talking about before. If it's broken, you can fix it, right? If it's a technology or a financial planning software, you have the ability to take one out and bolt another one on. If it's a CRM that you don't like, you have the ability to unbolt it and put another one on. And even, if you're at an RIA and the service that they promised is not being provided,
Hmm.
as long as you stay with the same custodian, you can open up your own RIA, move to another
Yep,
RIA, with very, very minimal business disruption, to your clients. So, in a lot of ways, if things are broken, you have the ability to fix it without a whole lot of disruption or being at the mercy of a big parent firm.
that's right. Because you really, really own your book. And look, I came from Ray J, the IBD. I owned my book. It wasn't that big of a deal to move.
Yeah.
But the one thing is also I like to remind advisors is you are 100% independent. In these IBDs, 100% independent up until the point you want to do something that the firm doesn't want you to do. Then they remind you how not fully independent you are, right? So real independence is if you think it's a good idea, you do it. Close to independence is you could do most things, but there's still some pretty hefty guardrails around, which is not a deal breaker for everyone, right? If you run the kind of business that's being fully satiated within the IBD space, by all means, you shouldn't have a burning need to leave, other than perhaps one reason, if we could touch upon this, which is your end game, right? Another big reason why people are going RIE, even older advisors, you would think, okay, maybe this advisor only has 3 or 4 years left before they really want to retire. Why would they go through the hassle of going RIA? It's that final monetization, the amount of money, right? And let's be honest, we're all here to serve people. We're also here to make a living.
Hmm.
The amount of money you will make in that final swan song sale, right? Equitization or monetization, I should say, is going to be so much higher in the RIA space than the comparable book would get in the broker dealer space. I don't think anyone would dispute that. And it's not like a little bit more, it's a lot more. So let's say, for example, you are super comfortable where you are. You have access to all the investments that you care to have access to. You're fine with their compliance methodologies. You don't really do much in content marketing, so you don't care about that. Why would you leave? Well, one thing you would want to consider is what is your final chapter going to look like? Is it going to be one of those sunset provisions at the wirehouses, which are okay, but not great? Or do you want to put a little effort in, go fully RIA, And now you're talking about much more meaningful multiples on your book of business that don't even compare to what you would get in the broker dealer world.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit of color on that, Chuck, I mean the main reason for that, I mean, there's just so much competition on the RIA space. There's so many large organizations with a ton of additional capital that are competing on your business, where maybe there's one or two people in their local broker dealer world that, could buy your practice or have the funding to do it. There's 30,000 RIAs out there that would be interested in your business, and hundreds that are, billions of dollars of assets under management or above, with, a ton of institutional financing to be able to put towards that. So it's very much a supply and demand that's driving up those revenues or those
Yeah,
multiples.
without question. Without question.
So why don't more financial advisors go RIA? A lot of advisors are interested in it. I have my I have my thoughts. A lot of advisors explore it, wind up going the independent broker dealer route, maybe as a first step before they go RIA. Why do you
Mhm.
think more people don't go directly to the RIA channel?
Yeah, I think it really is just lack of understanding. Really, I mean, the awareness of the RI channel now versus 5 years ago is so far above, right? That more and more people are understanding it. And I would say if this was 10 years ago, going the IBD to then go RIA could make some sense. But there's so many good tuck-in options right now where you could go RIA with the idea that you're going to go into your own RIA, which is an even easier transition. But if you're going to do that, and this happened to me just once actually, so that means it's happened to other folks too. We actually had an advisor that wanted to join Sovereign. They were with another RIA that used our shared custodian. Doesn't matter who the custodian was. And the advisor's like, I really like the Sovereign value prop better than where I am. Whatever, we're great. Let's bring you on. And the RIA that this particular advisor was with is like, yeah, you could go wherever you want. These clients are yours, but you can't use this custodian. You got to repaper everything. And
Wow.
that killed the deal
Yeah.
because he was coming from a large RIA. And there's a whole nother storyline there. Like, are these large RIAs turning into wirehouses? I would argue that yes, they are, for good and bad. But this RIA had so much clout with that custodian, they were like, don't keep this guy. So he got stuck there. So did he own his book? Yes. Were those his clients? Absolutely. Was he independent? You bet. But up until the point of the firm saying you're not fully independent because we're not going to let you use this custodian. So what I would say to folks, if you are going to look to that route, I think it's easier to go RIA, even if you want to set up your own. You could tuck in, but make sure, and by make sure, get it in writing that you could leave whenever you want. You could take your data. They will help you move your data, and they will let you stay at that same custodian. Because what's the sense if you got to repaper everything? Because going from RIA with custodian A to RIA-B staying with custodian A, that's a super easy transition. So something actually, too, Corey, I can mention that we're starting next year is what we call Sovereign as a Service, where we are actually looking to bring on advisors with the express intent that within 12 to 18 months, not only will we let them leave, but we're going to help them leave,
Yeah.
right? They would use us as a service bureau, but we would actually help them stay with the same custodian. We use Raymond James and Schwab. We would help them get their own ADV and do everything else. So it's really more of a service model because we think that a lot of folks out there really want their own ADV. They want their own firm. But boy, going from a wirehouse or even an IBD to having your own firm, that is a bit of a leap. So what we're creating is this pathway. We're calling it an incubator system where they come in, they tuck in, learn the systems, and then, walk out of their office Friday as being one of our IARs under our RIA. And Monday morning, they come into their own office in their own RIA, being an IAR with their own firm. I think that's going to be pretty exciting. And I think that's going to be the way of the future for a lot of these folks. And I think that's going to get those final people that maybe are on the fence. Do I want to go to another firm? Well, maybe they do if they know there's a pathway, an easier pathway to get from captive to RIA to your own RIA. And that's what we're looking to solve for with that. And I think that will get a lot of the people off the bench. One last thing, what I might mention that I think could also answer that question that you posed. I think a lot of folks are still going from BD to BD, taking checks. We're seeing that still every day. And I know you've talked about this. I know I've talked about this. And I tell you what, if you do the math, that is really just your own money being given to you in advance in a very tax inefficient way. And if you do the analysis, I don't know how you come up with any other conclusion than that. But someone dangles a seven-figure check in front of you, it's tempting. But if you do the math and have any belief in your business, more than 3 or 4 years down the road, you're not doing yourself any financial favors, and perhaps kind of handcuffing you into a situation that you may not want to be in 5 years.
I agree with that, and I definitely educate advisors on that quite a bit. I guess the other side of it is typically financial advisors need some sort of loan to make the leap to the RIA side. And there's plenty
Mhm.
of firms out there that will, help with that and give them the money for the loan cash flow while they're transitioning to the
Sure.
RIA side. But there's a lot of financial advisors out there, especially when they're moving from a more captive firm. They're moving from a firm where other advisors in the office are going to be competing for their business when they
Mhm.
transition. If they're getting a million, $2 million to transition and their transition winds up not going as well as they thought, they don't owe any of that money back. So yes, it may be an
Fair
inefficient
enough.
vehicle to get the capital, but it's pretty risk free in terms of the capital that they're getting. Where on the RIA side, if they do get some sort of loan or they're paying out of their own pocket and the transition doesn't go their way, you know, they're paying that out of their own pocket.
I
Um,
I think I think that's a fair assessment. I really do. And again, it's all going to be based on how confident are you with your book of business.
yeah.
But I have not seen yet anyone that's transitioned less than 90% of their book. And that's just in our experience, which is limited, to the, about 20 advisors that we have. And I'm sure you could speak to that better than I can with your vantage point. But I think if you know your book, there's not much reason to believe you should expect anything less than, a pretty successful transition. Although, there's folks that don't have that for sure.
I think a lot of financial advisors, just going back to some of the misconceptions, feel like there's not a lot of brand awareness on the RIA side. And it's just a hard thing to articulate to clients that they're making their move to an RIA. But I would make the argument that, a Charles Schwab, a Fidelity, a Raymond James, a Goldman Sachs
Hmm.
has much more brand recognition than some of the, independent broker dealers out there. And it's really all having someone like me or you, Chuck, to help an advisor kind of articulate that and figure out the story to clients. And I think if positioned the right way, that could give a client, much more comfort than being at, XYZ broker dealer that doesn't have brand awareness.
Yeah, I would actually even take that a step further, to be honest. So I remember when I got my CFP designation, which is a quarter century ago, a little bit more perhaps. I could not wait to tell that first prospective advisor, I'm going to work with you as a CFP and as a fiduciary.
Yeah.
Now, a quarter century ago, that went over most people's heads. Now you fast forward to today, I would say at least one out of three prospective clients that I talk to, because I still work as a financial advisor every day. I run a book of business and bring on clients. One out of three are asking me, "Are you a fiduciary?"
Yeah.
So now let's extrapolate that to the RIA model. I would say 25 years ago, you know, not being at like a Merrill Lynch or a UBS or what have you would be a disadvantage because everyone was looking for those big brand names. I would put out there that today, I think clients, I should say, are more looking for fiduciary advice. And you could really tell that story so much better as an RIA, which is where, as I like to say, fiduciaries live, and tell these clients and prospective clients, I'm making this move, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, because I don't want to be beholden to an NTF list or proprietary product or fill in the blank or quotas, even if that's even still around. I think there's some firms that still have essentially a quota, right? I
Mhm.
can give you some chapter and verse on that. I can't believe it's still happening. But you explain that to the client, I think you're in great shape and better shape than being with one of those sort of wirehouse names. Then you take that one step further and you start looking at that next generation, right? If we're talking the great wealth transfer, 70, 80 trillion dollars changing hands. Those monies are going into the hands of people that are going to absolutely ask, are you a fiduciary? And I would bet dollars to donuts that that next generation client that will be the recipient of those tens of trillions of dollars, they don't want the big banks. They want that independent fiduciary. I really do believe that. And I believe that because I see it firsthand every single day when I'm talking with clients and prospective clients. So I think what's was perhaps a disadvantage is now turned into an advantage because we are specifically saying we are not a big bank. We are the anti-big bank.
Mm.
We are here to protect you from the big banks. And that's the story that we use, and it's accurate.
I love it. I love the perspective. So I mean, you being from the independent, starting in the wirehouse, making the move to the independent channel, making a move to the RIA. Economics are always an important part of the conversation. As you mentioned before, advisors are running a business. Walk through your experience of the economics on the independent broker dealer side versus the RIA side.
Yeah. So here's the thing. That's probably the easiest comparison because whatever your costs are on the IBD side is going to be exactly the same as the RIA side, except for just one line item if you're putting together your pro forma, and that's compliance. So think about it. When I was on the IBD side, I had an office that I had to pay for. On the RIA side, I had the same exact office, different sign, same exact office. I had software because I always use my own software because I don't really like proprietary software. So I had a software expense on the IBD side. I still have a software expense on the RIA side. The only expense I have now that I did not have then is an in-house chief compliance officer and a compliance consultant. So all in, that's about $150,000 a year. Now, we launched a fund. That's pretty expensive. So, but that's going to be expensive no matter where you do it. First of
Yeah.
all, you're not going to be able to be allowed to do that in the broker dealer side, I don't think. But the expense is really IBD to RIA. It's pretty easy to do because just add in compliance. Now, if there's certain things you're going to look to do that you can now do that you weren't able to do before, that's a different story. But if you plan to run your same business model in the RIA space, all it is the compliance cost. That's the only additional cost.
Yeah, I mean that makes a ton of sense. Whether you are opening up your own RIA or plugging into your own RIA, you're starting with 100% of your revenue. If you're doing $1 million of revenue with most firms, you're looking at, a net $1 million in revenue. One thing I know there's significantly less of on the RIA side when I help advisors compare is just a lot less nickel and dime fees,
Oh yeah.
a lot less ticket charges,
Oh yeah.
typically lower platform fees, and not to mention, with a lot of firms, you're getting rid of the grid. When you take a look
Mhm.
at the independent broker dealer side, not only are you getting a haircut off of the grid, like a 90% payout, so the house is taking 10%, but you're also paying anywhere from 4 to 20 basis point platform fees on your
Mhm.
fee-based accounts, where on the
Yep.
RIA side, you're getting rid of the ticket charges, you're getting rid of a lot of the nickel and dime fees, and you start out at 100% of your revenue. And yes, you might still have some platform fees, but you're at least getting rid of that, 10% haircut that we were talking about before. So most of the time, long term, when you take everything into account, I typically see, the RIA being at least 5% more profitable, if not a little bit more.
Yeah, I would say a little bit more even, because the other one too I like to talk about a lot, because I think it's one of those hidden fees when you start pulling back the onion, layers of the onion, is the idea of NTF funds, right? No transaction fees. So if I want to have a low cost model to offer my clients that don't have ticket charges, well, in the RIA space, that's just exactly what I do. The average cost for the passively run models we have is like 2 or 3 basis points. No ticket charges. I can buy and sell them all day long, not one ticket charge. But in the broker dealer space, normally those very low cost ETFs, we all know who they are, they tend to not revenue share. And because they don't revenue share with your IBD, the IBD doesn't allow you to trade those without a ticket charge because they got to get paid somehow, some way.
Hmm.
Not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying that's the way it is. So now the term I like to use, and I wrote an article on this called True Net Payout. I've done several podcasts on this, and I think, Corey, you and I have talked about this before. The true net payout, the way I look at it is the total fees your clients are being charged, which are ticket charges, maybe more expensive funds because they're in the NTF platform to avoid the ticket charges, the platform fees. Then, of course, there's the nominal, like the 10% haircut, right? You're not getting a 90% payout. That's a nominal payout. You got to look at all those other charges. But then when you look again at the top line, what is your client, I should say, getting charged? The fees, the ticket charges, the perhaps more expensive ETF because you have to go the NTF route versus what's being direct deposited into your bank account after all those fees, the E&O, the registrations, the who knows what fee. Spoiler alert, your payout is not 90%. It's going to be far less than that. Uh, not to mention the restrictions on your abilities to do work. Again, doesn't make it wrong. Just be informed. What really is your true net payout and use that as part of your calculus into what you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, the typical financial advisor that I work with is doing north of $1 million in trailing 12 production. And typically on the independent broker dealer platform, I see them netting somewhere in the 60 to 70% range at the absolute highest. And that's dependent on
Yeah.
payouts, platform fees, local costs, things like that. And I typically see, the RIA being a little bit higher.
Mhm.
But also on the other side, the client paying a lot less in those nickel and dime fees that we were talking about as well.
Right.
So definitely beneficial on both the advisor side and the client side from what I see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say those are all one the same, right? So if your client's accustomed to pay 1.5 all in,
Yeah.
and in the RIA they could pay 1.25, well, you could put that 0.25, those 25 bips onto your fee if you feel it's warranted. The client's paying the same and you're really making more money. And now with that extra money, you could hire more staff, provide a better experience for the clients, and so on and so forth. I think that's an interesting way to look at it as well.
100%. Um, Chuck, is there anything else you want to cover?
That covers a lot of stuff, a
Yeah.
lot of food for thought for folks. And again, it's worth exploring, but more importantly, it's worth understanding what your own situation is, know what your true net payout is, know what it is that you want to do, don't want to do, and then you can make some better decisions. But as I say, don't forget about that final stage too, that final monetization. What is that going to look like? I'm in my later 50s, so I'm really giving that some thought. So in your 30s, maybe that's not top of mind, but at some point you will retire. At some point you will want to monetize that book. And I put out there that you can monetize for a better return for you, and I would argue a better situation for your clients, more flexibility to get that done in the RI space than the BD space, in my humble opinion.
I love it, Chuck. I appreciate it. I love what you're doing and how you're helping financial advisors get answers to these really, really complex questions. And I really, really appreciate the time.
No, likewise, Corey. I appreciate your time and all that you're doing as well. You're putting a lot of great content out there, super helpful, and I was glad to be part of it today. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Chuck. And I hope you have a great day.
You too, Corey. Take care.